Hi, everybody. Welcome to Biz Living Sober with Elizabeth Chance and today's guest, Lorenzo Borghese. Hello, Lorenzo.
Hello, Elizabeth.
How are you today?
I'm excellent.
I'm so
I
excited
like
you're
that we're
here.
both wearing blue.
I do too. And we didn't even get the memo. I didn't even send over a memo telling you what to
It's
wear.
Florida. It's, the light tropical colors is what I go for.
Isn't it? And I put some flowers behind us
I
so we
see,
look really pretty. Isn't it
I
nice?
see. I've got a box behind me. Is that pretty?
It is. It's really pretty because I know you're in well, you're kind of like moving. You're a little transient right now, would you say?
I'm moving all the time. Hold on. Is that Larry David? Larry David. Oh, it's Mr. Bean.
He has
One of the
dogs.
dogs is crying and it's Mr. Bean.
Oh my gosh. All right, before we go any further, I have to give a shout out to SoberLink. We've all been there. You say you're never drinking again, and then you drink. Lasting sobriety is about connection, honesty, and trust. Having a loved one who cares about your sobriety journey can be the key to ending your drinking habits. SoberLink helps to get and stay sober by harnessing the power of proof. Small enough to fit in your purse or pocket and discreet enough to use in public, SoberLink devices give you accountability and allow you to rebuild trust with ones who matter most, including yourself. As a recovery coach, I can't think of a better tool to maintain accountability, strengthen community, and prove sobriety to loved ones. Visit www.soberlink.com/BLS to learn more and receive $50 off your device. So there we go. We did our little.
So you want to talk about beer now?
We're going to talk about beer. No, no, we're not going to talk about beer yet. We're going to talk about. I want to talk about, for one, my listeners. Okay, so Bizzy is about getting busy, living sober. And yesterday, I celebrated 17 years without a drink.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy. But I have a crazy life, and it hasn't stopped me for living. That's for sure. And on my journeys, I have the opportunity to become very good friends with Lorenzo's parents, who I absolutely adore. And I just visited with them last weekend. And I was talking to your mom and dad about how fabulous you are, because we all know that Lorenzo's fabulous. So will you tell me, because we have friends in common and they want to know, what was it like to be on The Bachelor?
So that was 2006.
That was 17 years ago.
17 years ago. So
that's when I got sober.
That's when, yeah. So we're celebrating two accomplishments, I guess.
Exactly.
Yours bigger than mine, though. I don't, it feels like I was a different person back then. I was. What I can say about it is that it didn't really feel like it was me on the show. I felt like I felt like I was an actor, like sort of like it was an out of a body experience, because it's not really me to go and date 27 people at one time. It's really out of my character. I also, prior to doing that, I was like terrified to go on TV. I remember I had been on HSN prior to that time, and HSN, for people who don't know, is a home shopping network. My mother and brother on it. My father started selling cosmetics on QVC prior to them. But I remember the first time I went on to sell pet products, I was terrified. I couldn't sleep. I was terrified of the camera. I was terrified of public speaking. And all of a sudden I was casted for doing this show, which I never thought I would get. I remember my sister always said, "Oh yeah, you should do this. You should do this." And I kept telling her, "I've got a girlfriend, Eladia. You need to be single to go on this show. I think you forget that." She's like, "Well, if you're ever single, I'm going to submit your name." And my uncle is actually the one who casted me and got me on it. And he said, "Would you do it?" And I said, "Yes," but I didn't think I was going to get picked. So I always do what I sign up to do. And sure enough, and crazy, like for, I don't know what reason, they picked me. And all of a sudden I had to do it. And I was terrified to do it. And I just looked at it. I said, okay, this is sort of, I felt like if I didn't do it, I was going to get killed almost. And I remember, I don't know, it's an interview I saw of Jerry Garcia, who was my favorite musician ever. And what he talks about a story where, he did a lot of drugs. This has got nothing to do with me. But his story was, at the time, everybody was doing acid, and he was playing live, and this guy brought in a birthday cake for himself, and he's like, "Hey, Jerry, you have to have some. You have to have some." And he said, he thought to himself, "I know this guy does a ton of acid, and that cake has acid in it, but I'll just have some of the frosting, you know?" So he has some of the frosting. And the guy comes back afterwards, right before Jerry Garcia is about to go play, and he says, "Hey, Jerry, how'd you like the cake? I dumped 100 doses of acid in the frosting." And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And all of a sudden he has to go play live. And he said that it was an out of body experience, and he was playing for his life. He thought that the people in the audience were all gangsters, and that if he stopped playing, he was going to get killed, you know? And for me, it was like that. It was like, okay, this is not me. I'm just going to do this, because if not, I'm going to get killed in one way or another, and I'm going to get through this. And so it was sort of, you know, it was a business thing for me. Like, I felt like it was a business transaction that I had to complete. Not that I wasn't there looking, for potentially to find the person I was going to marry. But it was, I was open to it. I told him, like, "Hey, if you find me the perfect person, I'll do it." But I also knew it was a show. I knew it was a big thing for ABC, and I knew it was a business for them. And the only way I could have gone through it was just to check off every day that I was filming and say, okay, this is something I have to do in order to survive. And I know I'm probably the only one who got casted that felt that way, but it was so out of my personality that that's the only way I could cope with it.
Wow. Did Winthrop, like, that's his uncle, did Winthrop like twist your arm and be like, "Come on, you have to do it"?
No, he didn't. He didn't force it at all. I just said, "Hey, I know the casting person. I'm friends with her. Would you mind if I submit your name?" And I didn't think anything about it. I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Like, what are the odds of this?" And I remember the first call, I was at Serafina. I was in New York City, and I got a call from LA. I'm like, "Who's calling me?" And I walked out of the restaurant to pick it up. And it was this woman like, "Hey, I'm one of the casting people from The Bachelor. I got your name. Why haven't we heard anything about you?" And I said, "I don't even understand what that means." She goes, "Well, you seem to have an interesting background, and we know nothing about you. Do you have any headshots?" And I said, "Headshots? I'm not a model. Like, if you're looking for a model type guy, I'm definitely not your guy." And anyway, the conversation continued, and I said, "I've got a couple pictures of me." This was like before we were taking pictures on our phone, at least for me. I said, "I've got some pictures of me, with my friends, like from college and things. I can send you a couple of those." And she said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then it just escalated and escalated. And, it took numerous months, but I still never thought it was going to happen until I flew out to LA and met with the president of ABC. And he said, "Why should we have you as the Bachelor?" And I said, "Well, I'm not here to basically answer your questions. I'm here to ask you a question. Why should I do this show? I'm not even sure I want to do it." And
Good
then
for you.
yeah, well, I wasn't sure. And then he said, "Well, if you haven't seen the show, you're the main character. We want you to look good. It's a show about you. If you look bad, it makes the whole franchise look bad. And we're going to do all we can to make you look good. And we're going to support you on this." I was like, "Well, okay, that sounds a little more interesting." And I thought about it, and then, I was too far into it to say no. And that's,
So now looking back on it, would you do it again?
if they asked me to do it for
Like, if
season two,
yeah, if
no,
you
no.
no,
But if I could go back and say no, I still would have, like, I'm glad I did it.
right.
I don't have regrets doing it. I think if I didn't do it, I would have regretted, because I would have thought, what could have happened had I done it? Like, what would have changed in my life? And, I say this all the time. It did give me a platform. I launched my animal charity after doing it. And because I had a platform, it allowed me to go raise a lot of money and open a lot of doors. And with business, it helped a lot too. You know, it was also, there were some great moments of it. It was fun. It was, you know, and I guess the best part about it is that you're somewhat of a celebrity for a few years and you get tired of that. So it's the perfect sort of, all right, this is what it feels like. And you get that feeling and then it disappears and you don't miss it. But it was great to experience it and then be done with it.
And
You know, like,
I love that. Right. Because you didn't have to live your whole life in fame going, oh my gosh, there's paparazzi sitting outside of my door or whatever.
yeah, it allows you for that brief moment in time to feel what it's like. And if you really like it, I guess that's when the people keep doing more and more shows. And I did a couple more shows, but you know, I did 2 in Europe, which I knew wouldn't have any effect on me here. And I did another one in the US, but it was on you know, it was on Esquire Network. And that was just with some friends and it was fun. But I guess you can decide, hey, is this something really for me? And when it was never really for me. But I'm glad I did it. I mean, you know, I think I would have been really upset looking back and be like, oh, what an idiot. Like, who gets these opportunities? You know, I never thought I would have had an opportunity like that to actually be on a show. And I remember my mom had this psychic who came over from Canada. And I remember being a little kid and this guy would like lie down on the couch and he's like, you're going to be on TV. You're going to be famous for being on TV. I'm like, this guy's crazy. Like, I wanted to be a pilot at the time. I'm like, I don't want to be on TV. This guy. So I told my mom, I think I was maybe like 10 years old. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I told her afterwards, it's like, I remember that guy. We should reach out to him again because he was right. Like, what are the odds of that?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And have you ever talked to anybody that you were on the show with since then?
Yeah, no, I'm friends with a lot of them. You know, surprisingly, most of the girls still aren't married. And then I'm friends with Bob, who was the Bachelor, who was on the Bachelorette. I actually just did a podcast with him 2 weeks ago, and some other people from the franchise. I did come out with some great friends, and you know, it was an interesting experience. I think it's changed a lot since 2006. I've always said I don't watch a show. I didn't even really watch my season, but I've heard it's, you know, it's pretty crazy now. But I think the people that did it back when I did it, it was sort of a different mentality back then. And, you know, it's sort of like going to the same small college. You know,
Right.
we all graduated and we all had the similar experiences with it.
It's interesting because I would imagine now today with social media. Now, I have to tell you, I've never watched it either. I've never even gone and seen you on it. But I mean, it's just never been something that's interested me. But I think it's kind of fun because people love to voyeur into other people's lives. Like, that's why reality TV, like you were like kind of at that beginning stages of reality TV, if you think about it, right? Because it's like voyeuring into what people's personal lives are like, even while they're dating.
Yeah. And I think, you know, back then it was before TikTok and everything else, before all, you know, really the social media aspect took off. So now everyone can do it on social media. But back then, you know, it was the only way to really show reality on a spectrum like that. Now you can pick up your phone, you can see people doing stupid things, you know, what we call the train crash every single day. I mean, I get, you know, my mom, my brother, my sister, my father, you know, they always send funny things of essentially train wrecks, right?
Right.
And that's what these reality shows were and still are. But back then, that was your only, I guess, exposure to it because we didn't have all the social media we have now. I mean, we did have Facebook, and that was one of my biggest regrets is, you know, social media is really good for business. And back then it was only Facebook really. And I was, you know, I had an employee and she said, don't go on Facebook. It's for, you know, high school and college kids. You're going to look like a creep. So I was like, okay, like I'm not going to be on Facebook. I am now because everyone is, but it didn't, you know, it was before you could really take advantage of it on social media. And now if you do shows like this, all of a sudden, you know, you can endorse products and you get paid for things like that. And, you know, even now I think there's more of an upside, although I think the audience has decreased a lot because there's all other mediums to watch this stuff.
Right. It's kind of like the networks are kind of disappearing. I mean, I wonder if
Yeah.
we'll even
And, you
have
know,
networks in 10 years. Who knows?
it's great. You know, everyone's now on Netflix, Hulu, all those, or just watching their phones and watching, you know, social media clips.
Well, you don't even need to have cable, right? Today,
You
you don't, no, you just need a smart TV.
No, actually, so I just found that out. So there's going to sign up for cable. We're opening up a space in South Beach, and they're like, you don't need cable. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, just get a smart TV. It's got everything. I'm like, oh, all right. I guess I'm behind the times now. But yeah, I'm not going to get cable.
Right. It's like whoever knew that our TVs were so dumb before. Now they're all
Yeah.
smart.
Well, I mean, they were real dumb because we didn't even have. I guess my first remote control was a ski pole.
Right.
I'd sit, a few feet away from the TV and I'd poke it with a ski pole because that was the only way to change the channel,
Right.
unless I got up. Yeah.
It's crazy. So after doing The Bachelor, you launched your dog business. And how?
I launched it prior to
Oh,
The
you
Bachelor.
did?
I was already on HSN. I went on HSN in 2002. So I'd been on TV for 4 years selling dog products, but I launched my animal aid rescue organization after 6 years after, in 2012.
Okay. And what is that called?
It's called Animal Aid USA.
And how many dogs have you saved?
We have saved over 43,000 since 2012, and it's all done by 100% volunteers, meaning that everyone that works with me gets paid zero. They do it just because they love it, and that's how we can, we can save dogs for about 1/10 of what other organizations can, because we don't have red tape, we don't have pension plans, we don't have salaries, and we just, and then we have our vets who work for us do it at cost. So we have a really incredible organization, and social media has helped us raise a lot of money as well. So that's another great thing about social media. But I've got a great partner. Her name's Karen Talbot, and she's dedicated her life to saving animals. And her husband is right there with her. They haven't taken a vacation in years, and every month they drive to Georgia round trip. And that's how they spent their one free weekend, is saving animals down, because our facility is in Georgia, and we transport dogs from Georgia all over the East Coast.
Wow. So will you do anything to help the animals that are right now, suffering over in Maui with the fires?
I mean, if we get called upon, like, hey, we have these dogs that are in this area, no one's going to take them, we do help. We've helped dogs from Puerto Rico. We've helped dogs from all sorts of situations, and like obviously with the hurricanes in Florida, we've helped them. But essentially only when we really get called. But usually on something like that with dogs in Maui, there's so many organizations on the West Coast that can help. That are obviously a lot closer, because
Right.
transporting them from the West Coast to the East Coast is a long way. And there's once there's awareness, also the larger organizations step in, and not to beat them down, but they always love a media opportunity. So
Right.
that's when they all like step up. We deal with a lot of like local disasters that no one hears about. And Georgia, even if it's not a disaster, there's a lot of animal cruelty cases there, and that's the reason why we picked Georgia as our home state to save animals. Because at the time we started this, it was really bad. It was still legal to euthanize dogs and cats in gas chambers, where they would put dogs and cats in gas chambers. It takes about 30 minutes. They'd set the clock, and then they'd come back 30 minutes later. The animal control people say they'd have lunch, they'd come back, and then they clean out the gas chamber. And that's one of the reasons why we pick states like Georgia. And they had cardiac heart sticking, the way to euthanize dogs, where they actually take a stick with a needle at the end of it and try to puncture the heart.
Oh my
It's a very
God.
painful way. Yeah, it was awful. So fortunately, these ways of killing, euthanizing dogs and cats are now banned in Georgia. But yeah, it was awful. But with awareness and with social media, we helped change the law. We had a dog that was called Grace, and Grace was a beagle that came from one of the animal control centers that we would pull the dogs from. And the dog was put into the gas chamber. The animal control officer came back, and we don't really know how Grace survived, but she was underneath all the dogs, and maybe got a pocket of fresh air there. And the animal control officer felt so bad that she brought the dog to the vet, and the story became national attention. And great guy out of Chicago ended up adopting Grace, and then we teamed up with him and did a caravan from New Jersey to Georgia with the gas chamber, getting signatures, and that's, you know, and we helped change the laws in Georgia and help bring awareness to where this was still legal.
Oh
But
my
yeah,
God.
you know, Georgia, as I said, you know, you don't need a national emergency to find dogs and cats that really need help in that state.
How did you first get involved in this?
Um, I believe in fate, you know, and I was turning 21, and my girlfriend at the time said, "What do you want for your 21st birthday?" And I said, "I either want to go to Great Adventure in New Jersey. I was living in New Jersey,
Yeah.
or I want a black lab." Okay, so she was living in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I was in college. She was I think a freshman in college as well, but we went to different schools. And she was working at her internship at Chase. I actually Chemical Bank, which is now Chase in New York. And the day after I told her what I wanted, she calls me and she says her sister Cameron just called her from Greenwich, and her sister had no idea that I asked for a black lab puppy. Her sister had just called her and said she was on Greenwich Avenue and ran into this woman who had a box of black lab puppies for sale and thought they were the cutest thing, and called my girlfriend Hayden at the time and said, "You can't believe this. I just saw the cutest black lab puppies." And Hayden's like, "That's what Lorenzo wants for his birthday." So she calls me and she says, "You wouldn't believe what just happened." And I said, "What?" She says, "Cameron called me. There's black lab puppies for sale." And this is before, you know, I didn't knew anything about it, animal adoption, et cetera. I guess this was, so it was 72, 82, 90. It was 1993 because I just turned 21. And I said, "Cameron got the phone number, right?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's go there tomorrow." Because it was Friday when she called me. I drove up there on Saturday, went to this woman's house. There was one dog left, and I wanted a female black lab. It was a female who came up to me, and I said, "I have to have this dog." And so that's when I got Belle for my birthday. And I've been in Greenwich many times, like all these times, I've never once seen a person on the Greenwich Avenue selling any dogs, especially like a litter of black labs. So the odds of that are like just unheard of. And her sister didn't even know I wanted one. So then I got my first dog for myself. I mean, I grew up with dogs, we grew up with animals, but this was my dog. And yeah, the dog changed my life. And then when I did The Bachelor, I started getting invited to all these animal charity events in New York City. And I became friends with the dog people in New York City. There's a lot of them. A lot of them are crazy individuals, a lot of fun, but you learn a lot. And then I became friends with the people at the AC&C, Animal Care and Control of New York City. And they let me visit the areas of the center that nobody can see. And when I walked in there were 5 rows of cages. And the first row was the dogs that got in that day. And they were like, and by the time you get to the last row, those are the dogs that are being euthanized that day. And I said, "Why don't you show this to people?" And they're like, we can't, because the city won't allow us to really show this. They don't want people to know what's going on. And I started getting more involved with them. And I found out that the AC&C is funded by the sanitation department. Okay, so animals were looked at as garbage, you know, like it's sanitation. And so even when you were giving to this organization, you're not even really sure where it's going, because it could go to the sanitation department. And I started really wanting to help, because I was like, if, you know, I didn't know this, I didn't know how this works, and I didn't know how kill shelters worked. And everyone was against kill shelters. But once you go there, you realize that these dogs are basically on death row for something they didn't do. I mean, they're all innocent. And so I wanted to help the dogs on death row more than dogs in no kill shelters, because dogs in no kill shelters have all the time in the world to get adopted. These dogs have literally hours. So I wanted to bring attention to what was happening, because it was awful. And so I started going again to all these animal events. And then I went to a Humane Society uh, annual gala that I spoke at. And then a woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, you have to meet Karen Talbot. She's out of New Jersey. She's incredible. And she needs help, bringing awareness to what she's doing." And I called her the next day, and she came within 24 hours, drove from Southern New Jersey to New York City, met me for coffee, dropped off a movie for me, which was 22 minutes long, called Take Me Home. I saw it was a documentary about what she was doing, and I said, we need to do something together. And that's how this whole thing was born.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, but the odds of, again, going back, to this day, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen a litter of black lab puppies for sale anywhere on the streets.
It's just, but I'm so lucky to know your mom, because I know she's all about, and like believing in like things happening because they're meant to happen, and being like, just, there's no coincidences, I believe, right? It's all just a little God wink. And you had already started Get Royal treatment at this point, right?
Yeah, I started Royal treatment in 2002, and I started it because my dog Bello, black lab, started getting really bad dry skin, and you could see all the flakes all over her skin. I was also living in New York and in an apartment, and I was, the last thing I wanted, and I've been to those places where you open the door and there's a dog there because it smells.
Right.
So it's like, I don't want my dog to smell. I want my dog to have healthy skin. And it was before you could really do this research on the internet. So I went to the library and did all sorts of research, and found out that the shampoo I was using, the dog shampoo, was actually harming her skin, because dog shampoos at that time were made for human skin, and humans have different pH level. Our skin's thicker than dogs. I mean, there's all sorts of differences. And the shampoos that were dog shampoos at the time were literally human shampoos with like, a puppy's picture on it in lavender. And it was actually creating dryness because it pulls lipids off the skin, and we can relubricate our skin because we're non-porous. I'm not going to get it too scientific, but dogs are non-porous, and they can't relubricate their skin the way we can. And when lipids are pulled off, it causes dryness. And one of the things that causes lipids to be pulled off are surfactants, which are foaming agents. So I believe I was the first one to create a real dog shampoo for dog sensitive skin, where I didn't use any harsh surfactants. I didn't use the foaming agents that are cheap. I do use foaming agents, but they came from vegetable and coconut oils, which are a lot more expensive, but they help prevent the dryness. And then I went and started pulling organic ingredients. I had the pH level, match the dog's pH skin level. And therefore you could use the shampoo daily if you needed it, if you needed to use it daily. And because my brother and mother at the time were selling cosmetics for people on HSN, I approached HSN with the concept, and I went in there and I just had a bottle of shampoo, no label. And I said, I want to launch, the shampoo on your network. And this was before, again, I did The Bachelor. And they said, "Oh, we had a vet come on 2 years ago. She's a famous vet. She completely failed." And then I pulled out the data and I said, "Hey, if anybody's sitting at home, with a dog, it's your audience, and here are the numbers. Now, you did try 2 years ago, but people are getting more and more into taking care of their pets, and they're treating them more like humans. Just give me 15 minutes of an hour mixed show. You could sell whatever else you want in the hour. Just give me 15 minutes." And they said, "Okay." And I developed, I finished the line. I had a lot of help with my brother, and I was working with him at the time, launched it, and did really well. Shockingly, when HSN analyzed it, like, wow, this actually worked. And all of a sudden they said, "We like what you're doing. We're going to give you a bunch of hours, but you need more product." And all of a sudden I was in the pet space.
And you're still there.
Still there. Yeah. I'm not selling on TV anymore, but I'm selling on my website, and still doing new formulas and developing things out of Italy. And, it's still a passion of mine. So yeah, since 2002, I've been doing this.
Okay, I've never tried it, and now I want to get it for my golden doodle and my little Cavapoo.
Yeah, I'll send you. Yeah, just send me your.
I'll send you my address. I'll text you my address.
Yeah.
Okay, now you also, I heard, which I did not know until this morning when I was talking to your mother, that you wrote a book, The Princess of Nowhere.
Yeah, and that came out of, I guess, fate as well. I didn't know my family history at all. My father and mother really didn't talk about it. And then we took a family trip to Rome, I think I was like 14 at the time. And then they showed me, you know, the Galleria Borghese, Villa Borghese, and the whole history of our family. And in the Galleria was Paulina Borghese statue by Canova, which was one of the most incredible statues I've ever seen. And she's there, and she's topless, which was never done back in the 1600s. Although I'm sorry, it was 1800s. 1600s was when we had the Pope in the family, but this was in the 1800s, when you don't do things like this. You know, you don't
Right.
display a woman, especially your wife, topless. But Canova did this incredible statue of Paulina, who was Napoleon's sister, who married one of my relatives, Camillo Borghese, and it was an alignment to, you know, align France with the Vatican Church. So my father told me the story about Paulina, and then we went to our family. We have a Borghese chapel in Rome too, which is where my brother got married, and underneath the chapel is our family crypt. And I see Paulina's buried there, and my uncle, you know, my relative who was married to her is buried right next to her. And I was surprised that she was, you know, that a Bonaparte was buried in our crypt. And my father was like, oh no, she, you know, she really loved Camillo. He like, they hated each other at first, but at the end it was a love story. And he revealed this statue after she died to show the world his beautiful wife. But prior to her death, actually a couple months before her death, they fought all the time. There was a lot of infidelity, and they really sort of despised each other. And she actually had to get permission from the Pope to come back to Rome, because her husband didn't want her back. And then she ends up dying with him up in Florence. That's where she spent the last couple of months of her life. And my father said he had his mother, my grandmother, had these beautiful letters from the two of them exchange, you know, Camillo to Paulina, Paulina to Camillo. I'm like, wow, what a fascinating story. Like, has anybody ever written about it? And he didn't recall. And sure enough, after I did The Bachelor, I get approached, hey, do you have any stories you want to tell of any of your family members? And I'm like, yeah, actually I do. There's my relative who was Napoleon's sister, and she was known as the most beautiful woman in Europe at the time, but very scandalous as well. Infidelity. There was fighting all the time, and you know, but she was a very strong woman. I'd love to write about her. They said, okay. So then I had somebody help with the research, because I didn't know the whole history. And I found out that she was the reason why Napoleon got his first real powerful job. And it's because he was in a meeting, and he'd been retired from fighting. I don't know. I guess he was in the military, and I think it was a leave of absence. He didn't do anything, but his sister was 15 at the time, and one of the generals wanted permission to marry his sister. And I think the general was 45, and she was 15, and he needed Napoleon's blessing to do this. So guess who nominates Napoleon to be head of the French army? Napoleon's not even in the army at this time. And it was just because this guy wanted to marry his sister. And once he became in power, he said no. And then it became his favorite sister, and she lived with him in Elba. She was the only sibling and family member when he was exiled to go live with him in Elba. And when he tried to regain the throne and got caught,
Right.
she had given him a $500,000 pearl necklace that she owned, and it was in his carriage with him when he got caught. And that necklace has never been seen since. So I'm sure that's worth a lot now, but I wonder who has that pearl necklace of hers. And then I found out what was interesting is that when I've been back to our family crypt numerous times, and she's been mummified. And so she's a mummy in the crypt, and her heart is in a glass jar with her body in there. I'm like, these stories are just crazy, but you find out more and more. And I would have never known the history, you know. And I was attracted to the statue at first, and then I saw her in the crypt, and I was like, I would love to learn more. And sure enough, I ended up writing a book on it and learning a lot more than I ever expected to know about her.
And do you know that you can still buy that book on Amazon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can still buy it on Amazon, and I have a bunch of copies too. And
I need to read it. I need
yeah,
to
it
read
was,
it. I'm gonna send that to.
it's listed as historical fiction,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
it's based on many true characters, including her son who died. And actually, what's even so coincidences again, the house, well, the villa I stayed in Frascati for the Bachelor, which is right outside of Rome. It's on a hill, and it's an area where the Pope goes to spend his summer, is right up there.
Oh,
But the villa was owned by my relatives back in the day, and Paulina, there's frescoes there. She's painted on the wall, and that's where her son died. And I write about this whole experience too, which really changed her. But it was just it's an incredible story that I tell. But I was in the same house that, you know, and
that is so
she's painted.
crazy.
Yeah, it was the whole thing was crazy there.
It's now, what is the crazy story that brought you to South Beach Beer? What happened with that? What
That's
was
that's
coincidental
another
that,
coincidence.
okay, you have to tell me now. Okay,
Yeah.
what happened there?
So I got approached to do another show. I told you about the show on Esquire. It was called Lucky Bastards, and they wanted to follow me and five of my friends in New York City, our day and night life, you know,
Oh my God.
and the day life was your job. And Esquire Network was previously Style Network, owned by NBC.
Okay.
They were relaunching it, and I said, "What's your target audience?" And they said males 18 to 45. And I said, "Well, you want me to talk about my pet shampoo products to males between 18 and 45? They're not really my audience. My audience are primarily women who watch TV. Yes, males buy my shampoo, but it's not my audience. I don't want to waste my time talking about shampoos and my pet shampoos on Esquire." I said, "What if I do clothing? I have a clothing line that's I've been working on with my friend, actually a couple of my close friends." They said, "No, your friend Rocco's doing clothing. He's doing denim. It's too similar." And then I thought, what do guys like? I'm like, "Well, how about beer?" And they said, "Okay, yeah, you can do a beer brand." And that's when I started doing research on the beer industry, and started the whole concept then. And I was actually, after the show, I was going to launch South Beach Brewing in Brooklyn. Um, and I had a space ready. I had a commitment of $4.5 million from these investors. It was going to be in Bushwick, and Bushwick was the graffiti capital of New York City. I had the name NYCIPA, so I had a great name. At the same time, I was seeing all these brunch parties in New York City. I was like, you know what? There's no brunch beers. I should create a brunch beer. And then at the same time, coconut water was was just going crazy, and it was about to reach $1 billion in the U.S. in sales. So I called my friend who owned one of the largest flavors and fragrance companies in the world, and I said, "Hey, do you have any electrolytes like coconut water that I could add to my beer to help you stay hydrated?" And he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we just created one that's tasteless, that's not expensive, and I'll give you the exclusivity for beer." And so then all of a sudden I had a proprietary electrolyte that goes into this beer. I had the name NYC, and then what I was going to do with the artwork, because I think, you really need to create amazing like artwork packaging, to catch people's eyes. So I was going to get local graffiti artists to do different skylines of New York City, and that would be the artwork for my cans, etc. And when I was about to close on the space, and I had this great space right on it was like the little river that you could actually take a boat from that river into New York City. And they started changing the contract on me. And I found out that they were taking my business plan and selling it to other investors, which is completely illegal, because they were supposed to give me the money. And I said, "You know what? I'm shutting this down, and you no longer have this is mine. You guys are off the deal." And I moved to Florida, and I was just working on the pet products, and I sort of had this idea on the back burner. And a friend of mine comes over. He's like, "Hey, you remember you telling me about the beer concept?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Why don't you do it in Florida? I love the whole idea of the brunch beer and the electrolytes." And I said, "Yeah, but I had a great name. I had NYC. Like I don't want to be a small brewery. I want something that, that I can expand outside of New York and perhaps internationally. He goes, well, let's come up with a name. I said, okay. So I started looking that second. I was like, okay, how about Wynwood? Because Wynwood was a graffiti capital of Miami, and I just moved here. I didn't know that there was already Wynwood beer. Sure enough, it's taken. And he says, how about South Beach? And I was like, there's no way that someone hasn't taken it. And I look and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm like looking for hours. It's not taken. And I said, oh my gosh, let me, apply for this trademark right now. So I applied for it. And then I thought about the whole concept I had, which was the electrolytes to help you hydrate. I'm like, Florida's a lot hotter than New York. And then I thought about the whole brunch beer concept that I had. And then like South Beach is the home of brunch parties. And then I had the great name South Beach. And then I was like, okay, now I need an art element of this. And I'm driving into South Beach. And as I'm crossing over the 41st Street Bridge, it says, welcome to Miami Beach, this huge mural. And this guy by the name of Lebo signed it. And one of my other business partners says, hey, I can get a hold of him. You want to call him? I said, yeah, sure. So I call him up. I meet with him. I find out that he's a huge dog lover. He's there with his adopted dog and he wants to start an animal rescue charity. And I shake his hand. He's like, let's do this. And he became my whole branding of South Beach. And he was an incredible guy. Unfortunately, he just passed away at 50. But he created some incredible designs for us. And I remember this is the kind of guy he is. The first sketch I got, it was like 3 a.m. of our logo. And it wasn't good. All right. It looked like a pyramid with it was a pyramid with an eye on top. So very Egyptian.
Right.
And then on the side, there was a sun. And I sent it to all the guys that I was working on South Beach with. I'm like, what do you guys think? And it was silence. I was like, uh-oh. I'm like, this isn't good. So I look at it, I print it out, and I'm like, you know what? I hate it, but I like the whole sun element because I need something that symbolizes South Beach. So I get back, I'm like, hey, his name's Dave, but he goes as Lebo. I'm like, hey, Dave, it's a good first draft. What I like is the sun. I think everything else is too Egyptian. And, we're South Beach. He responds, ha, I was only messing with you. This was a test. If you said you hated everything, I would have refused to continue to work with you. But I forget there were four illustrations. They were all really bad, but each one had a sun. And I'm like, let's start with the sun. So he says, the fact that you picked the sun, which is what I wanted you to do, we're doing this 100%. Let's go. And that's how it all started.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah, and he was a great partner, and we're actually celebrating his life this Saturday. There's an event for him in South Beach. It's at 7:00. So, is it at your bar? No, we haven't opened the place where he's actually painted in there, and his family, and I'm sure a lot of his friends haven't seen it. So once we open, I want to have them there privately to show what he did in that space because they still haven't seen it. No, but it's at a park in South Beach. So I'm sure there'll be hundreds of people there to celebrate his life, but really, really good person. We would talk a lot. We would talk about politics a lot too. And he was more, he was more about freedom of speech politics like I am. And at first I didn't know that, because you have there was one meeting I was with, and I'm going to leave the person out, but I think everyone's got the right to vote for whoever they want. And she said, if you vote for Trump, this was in 2020, I'm never working with you again. And I said, that's very un-American of you. I said, I don't care who you vote for. I just hope that you vote because that is American. And we all have the right to have our own opinion. And if you don't have an opinion, you're not human. And if you're afraid to actually share your opinion, then you're a coward. And I have reasons for why I vote for the way I do. And if you'd ask me why, I could tell you why. And you could tell me why you disagree and we can have a conversation. But for you to tell me that you're not going to work with me because of who I vote for, I don't say that to you. I think if anything, I would respect your decision. I'd try to understand why, but I wouldn't say I would never work with you again. And that really bothered me about this conversation. And so I was always worried, because I think, who's that? Hey, Mr. Bean, keep it quiet. Can you hear Mr. Bean? But we had a lot of similarities that way too, where we felt, hey, nobody should be silenced. Everyone should have the right to say something. And if not, it becomes a communist country. And I've traveled to communist countries and I know what happens there. And people are afraid to share their opinions. And it's happening in the United States. I know so many people that say, hey, I would post this, but I'm afraid it could get me in trouble with work. Go back literally 6 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. You
could say whatever you wanted. You could share your opinion and everyone would listen. Everyone would, an opinion creates conversation. Now people are terrified. And if we don't stop this, it's going to get worse and we will become controlled. Like our thoughts are going to be controlled. Our actions are going to be controlled. And it's happened quickly. And people are blind if they don't see what's happening. And regardless of what side you're on, you need to be open to people's opinions, because when you're not, we're going to lose everything. We're going to lose our freedom. And again, I don't care who anybody votes for. I just care when they say, I can't vote for somebody. And considering that this country is divided 50-50 as it stands now, are we saying that 50% of Americans are crazy and 50% are saying? We all just have different reasons for voting one way, but when we try to shut each other up, we're going to lose everything.
So this is a song I wrote.
What do you think about Oliver's song about a north? What is it called? It's called Richmond, north of. Have you heard that song that he's had 9,000 views already? Before he even starts singing, he reads a Bible verse. Have you heard of this song?
I haven't seen it. I know the small town song that got, that they banned.
There's a new song that just came out. His name's Oliver. He's from Virginia. He's a farmer, and he just wrote a song about how.
I think I just saw it. Is it acoustic? And he's just.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So
yes.
I saw a clip of it yesterday, and again, I mean, everything is true. What's happening, right? Like if you're blind to it, all you have to do is go on the internet, go on Instagram. There's I see so many times where it says this information has been proven false. Okay. And I don't mean to be biased, but I'm just going to say this is a fact. I was flagged many times on Facebook because I was talking about COVID. I was one of the first that said, hey, my hypothesis. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was taught that hypothesis means I'm not saying it's a fact. This is what I believe. And this is why I believe something. I'm not sure, but I believe that this virus came from the Wuhan lab. I was flagged from Facebook, false information, blah, blah. And now it's pretty much if you're blind to that it didn't come from this lab, then I don't know what to tell you. But everyone, even Fauci's now admitting, oh yeah, it could have come from lab. And actually, if you look at his emails, he admitted it prior to that he believed that there was a possibility that it came from this lab. But anyway, I was flagged for false information. And it's never once been corrected that I was actually right. And all these organizations that have falsely made claims, they are never flagged for false information. You just see it more on the conservative side, and that's because it's becoming controlled. Now, I look at CNN, I see MSNBC, I see Fox, I see all the networks because I like to see what's going on, but I never see them corrected for all the misinformation they have given us, including the laptop. Okay, now it's a fact. And I actually personally had seen the laptop. I had seen the hard drive because I know people in media, and I saw everything on the hard drive. I'm like, if I've seen it, I'm sure everyone else has seen it. And they had it for a year and they knew it was real. Yet they pulled it down from social media. They controlled it all. And not once has it been correct. Not once have you gone onto these network sites and seen, just so you know, information has been false according to this network. I've seen it. I met Carrie Lake. I went to friend her on Instagram, and as I friended her, it says, "Are you sure you want to be friends with this person? They've had false information." I'm like, why don't you guys do this with all the reporters at CNN, all the reporters on MSNBC, all these reporters that have false information about COVID, about lockdowns, about the laptop? Never have I seen that. I see it targeted to the people that they want to silence. And that to me is scary. It should never happen. And another fact that I found out while I was doing all this research about the fact checkers,
Mhm.
do you know where the fact checker started?
Where?
It actually started when my relative, Camilo Borghese, was Pope Paul V. It came from the Vatican Church. Okay. And it came when Galileo said that the earth is not the center of the universe. And he had all the documentation stating why. He met with the church, and the church put together this organization of fact checkers to silence Galileo. And in fact, the church knew, according to the evidence, that he was right, but they wanted to silence him. So Camilo Borghese, who was the Pope, said, listen, Galileo, I'm not going to put you in jail, but you need to stop preaching about your belief. We believe you, but just be silent. And so he kept him out of jail. But when Pope Paul V, Camilo Borghese died, he couldn't protect him anymore, and Galileo was jailed. But they knew that it was real, that what his evidence was real, that the earth was not the center of the universe. And they created the fact checkers. You can look this up. And it started back then to silence the real facts. And that is terrifying. And that's what they've been doing to us. That's what they've been doing to me on social media. All I was doing was sharing information that I learned. You know, I said, hey, I'm just trying to save lives. I'm just trying to share what I know. You can believe Fauci. You can do what you want. That's okay. But there's other doctors that aren't being paid millions from the government that may not be compromised like he is. And look at their studies. And why are their studies no good? Why are these doctors that were respected from everyone, who are putting their own reputation at risk, who have absolutely nothing to gain, why are they doing it? Why? That's what I thought. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to follow the money. And when I followed the money, it got dirtier and dirtier and scarier and scarier. And you still, to this day, the people that don't want to believe things are not going to believe it. But, you know, ivermectin, again, I was saying, hey, this can actually work. And I know people who had taken it. And just last week, I believe now ivermectin can be prescribed. You might have missed that on most mainstream media, but now it's prescribed. You know why? Because now the COVID numbers are way down. So like, okay, we can actually now make it okay for doctors to prescribe ivermectin, what they had called a horse dewormer before, that had been used by billions of people,
including Joe
Nobel
Rogan.
Prize.
Remember when they did Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan was like, that's what he used, and they totally persecuted him.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw that when CNN posted a picture of him when he said, hey, I feel better, and they doctored his face and they made him look sick.
Yeah.
You can look at the before and after of actually him going out to, you know, talk about him feeling better to what CNN did with him. And that's when he realized, like, there's something going on here that isn't right. And then what was also interesting about ivermectin, which a lot of people didn't know, is that Merck had promised to give ivermectin out for free to anybody that needed it forever, for free. And it was on the first page of I believe Google like 6 months ago when I started researching it. You can't find it anymore. So I took screenshots of it, but you can, if you look up ivermectin, Merck, free, and I can send you those screenshots. And it was a link to the WHO's website. You click on the link and it takes you to a new page, the WHO's website page. This page is being revamped. I'm like, this is like, what are they? This is absolutely insane. And then you think about these people who were cured relatively quickly. Trump, who would be considered by some obese, by his doctor probably obese, although, you know, I think he looks, you know, I think he looks healthy. Great. But you know, medically he'd be considered obese and elderly. He recovered in 3 days with the treatment he had. yet this wasn't available for everyone. And then what really bothered me, what put me over the top, was when they said, yes, children 5 years and above should get it. And a lot of them were required to get it. And there was absolutely like 0% chance of these children dying from COVID. Oh, but it'll help them. No, it'll stop them from passing it on to their grandparents, which was not true. All of these things that they said was not true, and they did it anyway. And the people that haven't really researched it the way a lot of us have, that really looked into this, I asked them to, I'm like, go ahead, really look at this, and then ask yourself questions. Why would you want to give your child this vaccine knowing, and you can pull up these stats. Okay. When I looked at it, I think it was under 400 children between the ages of 5 to 18 had died from COVID. Now, when you really look at this, anybody with COVID in their system was a COVID death. Okay. So these children most likely died of leukemia. They could have died in a car accident. They could have died from many other complications. So essentially a 0% chance of that child dying. Yet they're telling parents to go ahead and put an experimental vaccine in your kids. Unheard of. And you know, people have become blinded to it because they've been controlling the narrative. And once you control that narrative, it's over. And that's why it's like, you should have the right to share your opinion, because once that right is taken away, like, for example, if we never share our opinion, you think they would have released ivermectin last week? Do you think that we would know that there's actually a high possibility that this virus came from the lab? If we had all been shut down, we wouldn't know anything. And every child, like all these vaccines they're giving them now, would probably be mandated of COVID vaccine for life. Any child you have going forward would probably have to get the COVID vaccine. So don't shut us up at all, because if you shut us up, we're going to lose a lot of information. And that's why I said, don't be afraid to speak. You know, yeah, I have a beer company. People say, hey, you know, aren't you worried? I'm like, you know what? I'll be judged at the end. And if people don't want to buy my beer because I'm sharing information on what I believe is correct, you can disagree with me. It's fine. But there's nothing wrong with sharing information. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. There's actually something wrong with withholding your opinion because you're afraid. And, you know, again, if they don't want to, you know, purchase my beer because of what, you know, I don't think I'm a bad person. I'm not trying to kill anybody. I have an opinion and I want to share it, and hopefully can help some people. But all I know is that I had COVID in 2020. I never got COVID again. I didn't get vaccinated, and people are like, you're going to kill people. I'm like, no, I didn't spread it once. I'm sorry. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't put anybody in danger. In fact, I did my research and I went on the CDC's website and I read, they stated that active natural immunity, which is immunity after you have the virus, can and most likely is the best defense for that sickness. Essentially, that's what it says, active natural immunity, but they ignored it. And they were telling me that I needed to get a vaccine and I need to get booster shots, et cetera, et cetera. And I also thought about it, I'm like, if I had just had the flu, would my doctor tell me a week later, you need a flu shot? I would tell him you're crazy. No, now I'm immune to it. I just had it. So when it didn't make sense, I just kept investigating it. And, you know, I think a lot more is going to come out within the next decade. I think they're going to silence it for as long as possible. I mean, there was a reason why was it the FDA that wanted all the studies postponed for 53 years. Why? Because most of them aren't going to be around anymore.
Well, you know what they call, do you know what they call people like you? Conspiracy theorists. Because you want to do your own research makes you a conspiracy theorist. Because you're questioning something that you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't look like 2 + 2 is not equaling 4. So I'm going to go read about it. That makes you a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. And I think those are the two most dangerous words in the English language right now.
I agree.
And they're not only dangerous, but they're lazy. These people, they call you conspiracy theorists. They don't tell you why. It's just like calling you racist. Okay. Why am I racist? No, you just started. That's how they stop the conversation without any substance. And that's when I know that people are lazy, and they look for terms like this, and they're good at creating these terms But to me, it just, when I hear that, I'm like, you're lazy. That's what you are.
Yeah.
You're lazy and you're closed-minded, and you've been, a lot of them, I say are sheep because they believe who they want to believe. I don't know why. I always look at it, why, like, who's got more to gain from this? Who's making all the money from this? Is it these doctors that are putting their life at risk, who are getting nothing from it? Or is it the pharmaceutical companies that own the doctors that are doing the research, that own, part of these news networks, that fund their political people that they like, that support all this? It's gotten so bad, but so blatant. And if a lot of people don't see it, that's to them, for them to maybe eventually, do research and have an open mind, or possibly I'm wrong. But as I always say, show me how I'm wrong. Like, give me the data that proves I'm wrong. I'm showing you data. And if you show me other data, I'll say, okay, you can believe your data, I can believe mine, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong. No. I can just take it further, be like, okay, now I'm gonna tell you why I believe my data versus this data. Look at where this data is coming from. Look at how many trillions of dollars this has generated for all these people. Look who became wealthy during the lockdowns. Look who lost everything. I was like, this is why I'm going to believe these other people. And then my own experiences, like, I know I never got COVID again. I could tell you thousands of stories of what I've heard. I'm like, these are experiences. And I take all those experiences, and I'm like, okay, it seems I'm more and more correct about everything I believed in. And sure enough, again, ivermectin. Oh yeah, now it's safe.
Yeah. It's crazy. We live in the craziest of times.
Yeah.
I've kept you for so long. I want to tell you, for one, I want you to make a beer that's non-alcoholic. I already told you that privately.
Yep.
I'm like, come on, let's make it. Let's make Bizzy living and sober. Like, we got to do it.
As soon as we get these tap rooms open, I promise you I will. I said my biggest battle right now is, you need your distributor to support you. And I've got a bunch of distributors, but if I need them to buy it first.
We're going to make it happen. Okay.
But in the meantime, at our locations, we'll have them. Because I know, people like beer. They just don't like the alcohol in it.
Exactly. And when is your bar opening in South Beach?
It should be late September, early October.
Okay. So everybody that's coming down, everybody the snowbirds that are all up north right now, while we're enduring this wonderful heat in Florida, will be able to come to your bar this winter, right?
Well, I look forward to seeing them.
I
opinions. Let's all have conversations.
Let's all have nothing wrong with it. And I might have you back on when we get closer to this election, because I do think that we need to have more people talking about their opinions. Because when I was growing up, you still were friends with somebody if they voted differently than you.
Of course.
And it was totally okay. And everybody didn't want everybody to think the exact same. We're not robots. I don't know why everybody wants to be a robot and think it's okay to we all have to believe in the exact same thing. Like, please, we're human.
Well, I actually think that you may be a little bit incorrect there. I think people are afraid. And, because I still talk to some of my friends who have different opinions of me, that they do think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, why? I was like, I have data, you have data, and we just choose to believe different data. That's okay. I'm still friends with them, and we talk. I don't hate them. They don't hate me. And I think what they've done is they've scared people into having conversations. They've scared people into sharing, anything, because they're afraid to be fired. They're afraid to be banned. They're afraid to lose followers. Who care? I'm like, if people don't want to follow me that I don't know because I have an opinion, I could care less. But people are afraid of everything now. And so it's working. And we've got to do the exact opposite. We've got to make people, hey, remember how you used to be able to have an opinion? Let's get that back.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, Jordan Peterson says it all the time, right? He's a psychiatrist from Canada, and says it all the time. He's like, most people cannot afford to say what they really feel because they could get fired. I mean, that's what they say to people today. You love Trump. You love Trump. You're a loser. Who are you? You're a total freaking loser for loving Trump. And it's like, really?
You're also a racist. You're this, you're that. I'm like, no, I have my reasons. Do you want to hear my reasons? Do you not want to hear my reasons? Do you know the whole, do you want to know why I feel this way? No. shut you off. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then I can ask them, I'm like, hey, I wanted Biden to do well. I really did, because I want America to do well. And he's been the biggest disappointment ever. And, I think that the corruption on his side is appalling. This guy is a millionaire now, and he was, how did he become a millionaire? You just have to ask these, like, this is insane. He even like brags about, the quid pro quo you're talking about. He's like, yeah, I had this guy fired. I mean, it's just disgusting. And, he says, I never talked business with my son. I knew it was a lie then. If he wanted to be smart, my father talks business, how's the business doing? That's what fathers talk to their sons about. He should have just said, he should have been honest. Okay. Yeah. It just in one way, at least honest in one way, say, yeah, he's my son. I'm curious on his business. And of course I've spoken to him about his business, and people would have had a little more respect, and they would have, he could have gotten away with it a little more had he been at least a little bit honest. But to say I've never spoken to my son about his business, the guy's a liar right on the spot. Like, what kind of father is that? Right. Who doesn't ask his son, hey, how's business? What's new? That's what you talk about. Part of it. How's the family? How's business? No, I never spoke to my son about business. Okay, you're a liar. You're a liar, and you're dumb to have that kind of statement, because it's going to come back to get you. And it has. And he could have gotten away with a lot more had he said, yeah, no, yeah, I know all about his business. It doesn't mean that I was involved in it. And people would have been like, oh, okay. But no, considering he said, I've never spoken to my son about business, stupid questions. Like, how badly and how blatantly are you going to lie? And I can't stand things like that.
Well, you're pretty courageous, and I'm so glad you talked about this today, because it's awesome to be able, because I love to have conversations, and I think we all need to be able to talk about these things and not be afraid, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it's enough afraid. I've had people that don't want to be my friends anymore because of what I believe, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's just, I wish them well. I wish them well. That's the best, right?
I wish them well too, but that they were never really your good friends, because your friends have always support you no matter what, unless you're a criminal.
Exactly.
But to have an opinion and be able to explain why you think a certain way, that's America. And that's why we live here. And don't take that away from us. And everyone who's trying to, they're doing really huge harm to our country and the future of the freedom in this country. And of course, getting rid of our First Amendment. Yeah. Because that is one of the most, I think it's the most important. It's the most important freedom we have besides voting in America is free speech and being able to share your thoughts.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on here.
All right, Elizabeth. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to Lorenzo, you can always reach me at elizabeth@elizabethchance.com, and I will forward it over to him. And until next time, keep getting busy, living sober. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right, bye.